We're working on it.
John Haverstock, our town manager, up here on the stage. And I saw Paula Nolte over here, our director of human resources. And we have a good crew here from Junction Arts and Media that are helping us
John
with the
Haverstock,
sound and
our town
Zoom
manager,
and some of those details.
up here on the
So really
stage.
thanks to all of you as well. And I saw Paula Nolte over here, our director of human resources. Our town is blessed with dozens and dozens of volunteers who do everything from working the polls to coaching sports to grappling with sound and climate change and some of those details. If you've been thinking that you might like to be involved in our town and schools as a volunteer, Paula Nolte over here, our director of human resources, great complete list of what's our town is blessed with dozens and dozens of volunteers. For example, we have everything from working the polls to coaching sports to grappling with sound and climate change and making this. If you've been thinking that you might like to be involved in our town and schools as a volunteer, Paula Nolte over here, our director of human resources. If you're interested in that, our town is blessed with dozens and dozens of volunteers. For example, we have a good crew here from the Junction School to Haverstock, our town manager, and if you didn't think of it, you might like. And then finally, thanks to everybody here for showing up. Paul over here, our democracy is more than just voting. You're interested in the town is blessed with dozens and dozens of volunteers. For example, ourselves for building the whole town boards to grab the Haverstock, our town manager, and if you didn't think of it, you might. And then finally, thanks to everybody here for showing up. Meeting is all about democracy is more than just voting. You're interested in the process. Okay, tonight's meeting is the process of we'll start with the town budget presentation. We'll have a school budget presentation, and then we'll have a question and answer period with our local candidates or candidates for local office. The way I'm hoping this will work is we're going to start with the town. They'll make a presentation and we'll have a chance for some Q&A, all as part of that one section, which I hope will take about 30 minutes. At that time, then we'll turn it over to the school board. We'll have the same kind of format, chance for a presentation, opportunity for questions. And then we will move into the candidate portion of tonight. My final housekeeping item tonight is, since this is officially town meeting, you must be a registered voter in the town of Hartford to speak at tonight's meeting. This is the state statute and part of the formal meeting. So when you approach the microphone, I'm going to ask you to state your name and where you live, and you're free to give us a street address or village or town, all good, but just let us know. There's one exception that I want to propose for tonight's meeting, which is that I would propose to the group here that any employee of the town or school district who does not reside in Hartford yet wishes to respond with relevant information to voters' questions be allowed to do so, which I think will allow the meeting to flow more smoothly. Is there any objection to allowing town and school employees with relevant information to participate? Okay, I hear no objection, so we'll have that be the rules for the evening. Okay, that's all of the housekeeping part. We're going to get started right away with the town, so I will turn it over to Mike and John and take it away.
Thank you very much, Chuck. I do have a PowerPoint that should be on. Was on the screen. We will need that. I'm on Zoom as a panelist, so it should be.
It's like we're working behind the scenes here.
Well, while we figure that out, I'm Mike Hoyt. I'm chair of the Hartford Select Board. I'm with John Haverstock, the town manager. And our goal tonight, we have a short PowerPoint, about 8 slides. We want to take you through this year's proposed budget, the process that we undertook as the select board, working with the department heads and John and town staff, and kind of show you, what does it mean for you? What does it mean for your tax rate, your tax payments? What does that money get you, essentially? What are some of the challenges we face in this, economic climate? It's unfortunately been a tough couple of years, and prices remain pretty stubborn. And we'll discuss all that. So we're going to give you a brief overview, and then we'll be available for questions. So without further ado, fiscal year 25-26 budget. So, okay. So I want to start off with some of the background, how we get here. So Hartford's budget process begins in September and October. Generally, the select board provides some broad budget guidance to the town staff. In October, the department heads develop their budget proposals. Then they meet with John and our finance director, and they review the budgets, asking questions about, the revenues, expenses, things like that. And then the town manager will make modifications. So later on in the fall, late October, early November, these revised departmental budgets are combined and they're presented to the select board. So many of you know that's a very busy season for us. We're meeting almost weekly, sometimes twice a week, mainly just to give time to really get a sense of the budget, right? So we have all the department heads in. They give us presentations on their proposed budget. Actually, after we have a chance to look at all that, the select board kind of comes to a decision, what do we think? What do we want to see in terms of changes? What are our overriding goals in this particular budget cycle? So this year, the eye essentially was on trying to provide some amount of property tax relief and have the lowest budget increase that we could without eliminating town staff positions. So our initial budget we looked at was initially a 22% increase. And the board asked John to work with the town managers to find $700,000 in savings. Now the staff, because they are excellent and go above and beyond, found something like 1.3 million in savings, right? So that initial 22%, it came down. It was about 9 or 10% then. The final sort of step we took as a board was to allocate money from our unassigned fund to essentially buy down the tax rate, right? So that's money that we had unassigned. I think we put in a little over $1 million. And so that helps bring the increase down, right? So that's why
And it has the benefit of returning taxpayer money to taxpayers.
Yeah, very good point, right? So eventually this budget went from an initial 22, it went down to 4.71%, right? You know, that's not always an easy increase to live with, especially in times like this. You know, the prices are stubborn. But it really is a question for us, I think, of, you know, there are two sides to it. What's the lowest tax rate we can get while still providing the services that people in Hartford expect, right? Like I said, just as an example of how much costs, a lot of them outside of our control have gone up. If we had had a 3% budget increase, that would have necessitated the elimination of staff positions, right? It's really in that case where things are getting more expensive and it's tough. But we got that number down to 4.71. And so the next thing, you know, what do you get for that money? We have funding obligations, right? So we have our personnel costs, salaries, overtime, FICA, retirement, things like that. Healthcare has been particularly sort of a sticky issue the last two budget cycles. It went up by 11% this year. I think it was 11 last year, if not 14, something like that. So we have some of these, you know, cost drivers that are really difficult that we don't necessarily have a lot of control over. But so that's health insurance, the HRA, retiree healthcare, dental. Then we have to have certain insurance that the town carries, right? Most people know workers' compensation is a main one for town staff. Then there are other operating costs, right? So we have debt service, we have county taxes to pay. This funds the libraries, the cemeteries, courts, senior services. Then we got our lease payments, fuel, you know, fuel of all types. Can get expensive. Then we got our road salt and sand, road paving, resurfaces, you know, computer equipment, things like that. You know, the general things that you think of and you can see kind of in a tangible way in town, particularly with the public work stuff. So those are the main obligations that we have as the town in providing services to the public. John, you have anything else you want to add to that one?
No, you covered them all except for the fact of just the normal operations of all the departments. These are the costs above and beyond those. I mean, obviously, it takes money to continue having a fire department, a police department, a planning and zoning department, an assessor's department. So these funding obligations that we're talking about are above and beyond those normal routine functions of government.
Thank you, John. Sure. So a little background on this particular budget. The current fiscal year FY25 that we're in, the general fund budget is $21,655,825, and that includes all the service organization appropriations. Those are the ones you see and vote on voting day. You know, do we allocate this much money to this group, et cetera, right? So our proposed budget this year is $22,676,506. So like I said, that's an increase of 4.71% or a little over $1 million over the FY25 budget. So that means we need to have an increase of 5.19% in the amount to be raised by taxes. So generally what this is going to mean, in effect, is an increase of $151.04 in property taxes on a $250,000 home. So that's sort of the bottom line, the nuts and bolts. What does it mean for me when I'm paying my property taxes? Our projected non-tax revenues increased by 15%. And so just looking at this FY26 proposed non-tax revenues, we have 3.6 million, a final transfer of our remaining ARPA funding, which after we had spent some stuff on it in previous cycles, was 136,000, plus a transfer of 1.479 million from the unassigned fund. That's what the board did to bring that budget down finally from, roughly 9% down to 4.71, right? We're basically putting that money in there to buy down the amount of tax that folks pay. So our current proposed budget, that's going to leave 17,421,399 to be raised by taxes. And that includes 211,000 of service organizations appropriations. And like I said, those are the ones you're going to vote on voting day. So just a little context, I think, is useful. The recent tax rate history, and unfortunately, you see in the last 2 years, they've been difficult. And I would argue, mainly due to costs that we don't really control, right? And so that's why you see those rate changes and that increase going up. I mean, essentially, we're at a point, right, where the cost of just doing regular business in town has gone up. And there aren't a whole lot of ways that the state allows us to get additional revenue. One of those will be on the ballot on Saturday, and that's the local option sales tax. But that's basically the idea here, right? It's going up. Hopefully, it will start to see some relief in that as inflationary pressures hopefully drop. So that's the recent tax rate change. Anything on that, John, you want to add?
No, other than I think that one person or another might notice that we have a very modest anticipated growth in the grand list. And several people have commented through this process about how important it is to see that grand list growing. And I'm very pleased to make the announcement that we're right on schedule with our revaluation, which will generate a grand list, which again is not anticipated to grow much this past year, but will bring some equity to property owners throughout the town. The reval, it's probably been overdue for a year or two, and that should bring more fairness, more equity across all property valuations in town. And that will be the basis for the tax rates that the select board adopts in July, and which are featured in your July and August tax bill. So coming up. So thanks to Rick Vincent in the assessor's department and our consultants at Tyler Technologies for doing a good job thus far with the revaluation process.
Thank you, John. FY26 use of other revenues. So we do have a proposal to use some of our current local option tax balance to make a number of purchases. So Hartford, we impose a local option tax 1% on rooms, meals, and alcoholic beverages, right? We have a current balance of $503,000. So this is money that's already been raised, right? And it allows us to basically fund, in this case, these types of purchases without adding to the tax rate. Under the law, of course, you, the voters, need to approve these articles, and they are on the ballot for voting day. But this year, what we're proposing is using a total of $500,000 in local option tax funds. So that's 2 vehicles for Parks and Rec, 2 for Public Works, and 1 for the police department. That's a total of $442,000. And also the purchase of vehicle extraction equipment, otherwise, known as the jaws of life.
If I could, I'll just make the point that the moderator is correct. There'll be much more discussion about this on Saturday. And at the same time, for any of you who want to know more about these proposed purchases with lot revenues, you can go to the town's website. The presentations that were given at Warrant Information Night were recorded, and that's very good viewing as to why these department heads feel that these replacement vehicles are important to their fleets. These are not new wishes or wants. These are replacing old, tired equipment. So there's hope that there'll be some support at the time of town meeting day.
Yes, thank you, John. So some of the factors, I know I'm sounding like a broken record a little bit here, but some of the factors behind the budget increases. So our ARPA funding ended, and to, I think, town staff and select board's credit, we were able to eke out every last dollar of ARPA funds and apply them to needs for the town. a wage increase for our employees, 4% effective July 1, 2025. So that's a cost driver. And whenever someone's wages go up, other things like the FICA tax, things like that also go up. So that sort of, draws that all in there. The health insurance premium increase of 11%. So again, this health insurance costs have really been an issue, I think, over the last 2 years. They just seem to keep rising, and I don't know if anyone has a plan to get them in check, but we got to do what we got to do. That's what happens. And then finally, people talk about our spending, this and that. The only other thing we have is we expanded 2 positions, right? Both of which are positions we'd heard, or at least I'd heard from a lot of people in town, thought was very necessary. Communications director, we'd been hearing for years that the town didn't do a very good job communicating to people. We hired J.D. Hawks, Hartford graduate, as communications director in a part-time role. And frankly, he's been really, really good. And I think it's a great public service to make sure that info like that is available easily, and stuff is accessible. So that would take that position to full-time. The other, we had assistant town clerk position also going to full-time. Any thoughts on those, John?
No, but I will point out, as you've mentioned, so much of these cost drivers are related to wages and benefits for staff. The large majority of the budget is composed of people, staff, and what it takes to hire, retain, and recruit good quality staff.
And I agree. I think Hartford, we have an excellent staff. Our police and fire departments are very well regarded. Our Parks and Rec department is regarded across the state. It's probably the finest in the state. DPW, all the folks, they do a really great job. And it makes John's life easier, makes our lives on the board easier, and it's great that we have such a dedicated town staff.
I want to point out also,
Yeah.
Mike, that we've done a very good job, or I should say those department heads, Brian Gazda and Chief Sheldon, who I think is sick and not able to join us tonight, have done a good job filling up vacant positions in their departments, whether through lots of controversy associated with policing, especially 2 or 3 years ago, as you can recall. It was hard to hire and retain police officers. Sometimes it's hard to compete with Lebanon right across the river, sometimes offering $20,000, $30,000 bonuses. But regardless, the Hartford Police Department has a good, solid culture of developing leaders for the future. That's why we were able to hire from within. And it's a reason that they've done a good job filling vacancies to almost full staffing now. On the DPW Highway Division side, Brian, working with Paula in our HR department, have done a fantastic job filling so many of our vacancies. So now, while we may be losing a mailbox here and there to the new staffers coming on, we hope you'll be patient because we have a lot more people behind trucks to plow us out of snowstorms.
Thank you, John. Yeah, we have an excellent staff, and we're very lucky to have them. They're an asset to the town of Hartford. So we're about to go to questions, but I just want to sort of sum up maybe, it's been a difficult couple budget years, Speaking for myself, as a member of the board, like my goal isn't always to just find the lowest possible tax rate that's possible. There's a balance, there's services on the other side, and I think this budget represents a good balance between the two. Is it higher than, maybe I would personally like? Yeah, I don't really care to pay taxes either. But, it's one of those things. I think we did a very good job in a very difficult economic climate and struck a balance between being able to continue to provide the services that you all expect at a tax rate that I think is reasonable, particularly under some very difficult circumstances. So with that, I think we can go to questions. I'll turn it back over to Chuck.
Okay, do we have any questions for our presenters? If so, we have only one microphone this time. It's right here. So if you want to come on down, tell us your name and where you live, and we'll take it from there.
Yep. Let me stop the screen share.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, hi.
It
It works.
works.
Marcy Bartlett, I live in Wilder. I do have a question on the public information person, JD.
Sure.
By the way, I love what he's doing. I value the summaries that come every couple of weeks. Oh, I'm on the TV. The question was, what is the rationale behind change that into a full-time position?
John, you can take that
Yeah,
if you
I
want.
certainly can say that putting JD aside, the position itself has performed very well. And there's a real appetite for more communications from the town. People's appetites seem to have been whetted by getting some good, reliable information. And we would like to produce more of it because, as I said, whether it's by that position helping the various departments or keeping our website up to date or making it more intuitive of an experience for people coming in and wanting to learn more about the town through the website and other platforms, and or participating or moderating or playing a role in social media, which a lot of us have not had the time to do. All of these things the current director has done and is eager to do more of the same.
Thank you, John.
Yes, next question.
Hi, Eric Francis, White River Junction. I'm just curious what the total healthcare portion of the budget is for everybody. How much of this is healthcare in terms of percentage of the overall budget request, and what is the total dollar value of the healthcare at this point? And I'm just thinking long term on this. It goes up, and this is a statewide phenomenon, probably a national phenomenon every year because it's a private system, and I was just up in Canada for the weekend where they are having their own problems with the national healthcare system, but they don't pay this kind of percentage out for this. I mean, they also don't get a chunk of services they thought they were going to get for it. But this is a perpetual issue every single cycle. It's just, oh, and by the way, healthcare is going up X number of percentage points. I'm just curious where we are at this point in the snapshot and what the totals are.
The answer is I don't know as I sit here, Eric, but I can certainly follow up, not just to you, but to the whole group on the town's website as a follow-up to give you an idea about the percentage. I will tell you that part of the problem with health insurance, at least in Vermont, is the lack of competition. It's really Blue Cross and MVP. And beyond that, you're talking about much bigger organizations who have access to other competitors. And so we've made the decision over these last few years not to chase our tail and bounce from one healthcare provider to the other, because that's probably a losing proposition. So at least for the last several years, we've been with MVP, and we've agreed that over these last few years, it's represented a better value than Blue Cross has. But I can get those figures to you. I just don't have them handy.
Thank you, John.
Other questions for the select board? Yes, sir. Introduce yourself.
Hello, Paul Sunday, live in Wilder. Thanks very much for having this night, and just really appreciate the work of our town staff and elected officials. This is challenging stuff, so thank you very much.
Paul.
I had a couple things. One, I think I know what ARPA is,
Oh, yeah.
but can you?
American Rescue and
American Rescue Recovery Plan Act. So it was one of the first, I think it was one of the first pieces of legislation passed under the Biden administration. And it basically just gave municipalities a lot of money.
Yeah.
We ended up with like 2 million or something, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
A little bit of relief funds.
Great.
So that was money the feds gave to us. With some, not particularly onerous conditions on how they were spent. We had to spend them all by this year.
Yeah.
And so.
Or at least commit, we had to
Commit
the
to
funds,
spending it.
and
Yeah.
we'll still have another 22 months in which to write the last check
Yeah.
on those funds.
Okay.
Okay, and yeah, to your question.
And the second question, there was a note about grant funding. I was just wondering about kind of non-tax revenue, what our opportunities are there and how we're approaching trying to get more of that.
Well, certainly, we're very aggressive in the various departments to chase down grants funds. I know that it's constantly on the mind of the folks at DPW, Police Department, Fire Department, other departments, Parks and Rec. Everyone's looking for, and we get periodic updates from groups like the Vermont League of Cities and Towns about grant opportunities. Unfortunately, the federal situation still needs to be sorted out a little bit before we can have a lot of confidence into what sort of federal grant opportunities there will be going forward. But we're watching all of these discussions and debates play out on the state and national stage.
Yes, introduce yourself to us.
Colin Butler, Wilder. Mike, I think you talked about using $1.4 million of reserve balance.
Yep. Our unassigned
To
fund.
bring down this year's budget total.
Right.
What's the balance after you do that?
1 million. We still had 1 million left. We've heard different things, I think, over time about how much you should really have. Unassigned fund is like a cushion, and 1 million. Some people might even say that's a little conservative, but it was, roughly 2.5, and we put in the 1.5 to get it down. So we still have $1 million in the unassigned fund.
And you potentially could be adding a little to that if you run under this year's budget.
Yep, definitely.
Do you know at this point whether that's going to happen or not?
We're going to have a presentation tomorrow night at the select board, and I encourage you to come or watch remotely. We'll hear from the finance director about how we're performing against budget year to date, the first half of fiscal year 2025.
Okay. I guess I'd like to make the observation more for the room than you folks, because you certainly know this, but that reserve fund balance, once it goes away, is gone. And so if you're going to spend $1.4 million of it this year, that means if you don't touch it next year, if you are good about preserving a fund balance, then the town's budget is just going to naturally increase by the 1.4, assuming no costs go down, which is probably a pretty good assumption. So within a year or two, or if you do the same thing again next year and spend another $1 million, bring the reserve balance to nothing, then you don't have an opportunity to bring the tax rate down artificially by using fund balance. So we should all be prepared for a pretty substantial tax increase within the next couple of years if you use up the fund balance the way you're doing. So I'm not saying it shouldn't be done, but I think we all need to be aware that it can only be done when you have a fund balance to use.
Thank you, Colin. I think that's a good point. It's something to keep in mind. It gets to that idea of like, where are we going to find revenue that's not, where are we going to find money that's not raised by property tax, and there are not a lot of options. On Saturday, I will be very happy to explain my support for the local option sales tax and what that means, because I think we're coming to that point, right? Like, it's just getting expensive to do the same business we've always done. So that's something we'll talk about, but I do think it's a very good point Colin made to be mindful, that when we do buy down the tax rate, there could be consequences in the future. Hopefully, like I said, some of these price pressures, yield, but we just don't know. So I do appreciate that comment.
Other questions for the board chair or the town manager? Okay, I see none.
All right.
Very good.
Thank you all
Thank you
very
very much.
much.
Thanks very
For
much.
listening to us.
Okay, we'll have a 60-second pause here while the school board comes on up.
Second, as soon as. All right.
Okay, we'll move right into the second portion of tonight's evening, which is a chance for the school board to present their budget. And we'll follow the same format, have a chance for presentation and then Q&A afterwards. So Peter, take it away.
Certainly. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Peter Merrill. I have been on the school board for something close to 15 years. I lose track. And with me is Jacob Bazina, who is our budget manager for the district. So straight into the report. The budget this year is basically a level services budget, by which we mean that the budget doesn't add any people, it doesn't add any major resources, with one small exception. We're basically staying exactly where we were in terms of what we're providing to the students. And so that's sort of how we developed the budget, but what does actually mean in terms of what the budget was? Well, just because we didn't increase services didn't mean that the budget didn't go up significantly. In fact, it did. The administrator's contract by about 63,000, the Hartford teacher's contract by about 536,000, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the total increase, can you show that, is $3.9 million in terms of expenses. The biggest portion of which, of course, is the first series of payments on the bond to work on the high school, and the other areas that needed repair, such as the chimney for the middle school and the elevator in the middle school. So the various kinds of services we had talked about last year when we proposed the bond, and it was voted on by the members of the community and passed. Now, given the complexities, to put it in a nice way, of our school funding formula, just because we spent more doesn't necessarily mean that there's a direct one-to-one impact on the taxpayers. And this is sort of the heightened example of that. So there's some things here to look at for the FY26 budget line, a column that you can see there. We had about $55 million in total expenditures planned for this year, which is, as we said, is up around $4 million. It's not the exact number that we talked about, because that was the amount we were talking about first was the amount raised in school budget, which is paid for by the state, and the rest of it, the difference is the money that is raised through various fees, grants, other kinds of income that we bring in. We operate a number of collaboratives that are funded by the members of not only this district, but all of the surrounding districts that send their students to those collaboratives and so forth. So the budget that we're talking about is 34 million number on the first yellow line there, which is the amount that is immediately affecting your taxes. The rest of it's paid through in other ways. And if you look, you'll see on the line just underneath that first yellow line that the number of the long-term weighted average, which is a incredibly complex formula the state has used to figure out our effective number of students based on what grades they're in, the degree of poverty in the district, second languages, kinds of things. There are all sorts of adjustments they do to our number of students, including we getting more students. And we went up to 2,152, which means when you divide it all out, it's just slightly over $16,000 per student expenditure under the budget that we're talking about, which is up significantly from last year, but significantly less from the year previously. Last year, we were reacting to the common level of appraisal, which is just below that second yellow line. It has been going down drastically. The common level of appraisal is the difference between what we on the tax rolls value our property at and the fair market value. That's the percentage because we have been a long time since we last got an appraisal. The appraisal last year was at 66%. Because the town is stepping up and doing the right thing for themselves and for us, credit to them, we were able to use a common level of appraisal estimate of 100% for this year. This is actually probably significantly lower, but it was the safe number to use. The state was saying that we could use something in the order of 130% instead of 100%, given all of the adjustments that were made to the common level of appraisal and everything. But for purposes of figuring this out, we used the common level appraisal at 100. And if you've been paying attention to budgets for the last and taxes for the last umpteen years, you'll notice that while what we spend drives part of what the tax rate is, the common level of appraisal is when it's low, our taxes go up tremendously, and vice versa. When it's high, our taxes drop. And since we're able to return to 100 for this year, our taxes are going down by 13.5%. The tax rate, I should say. What it actually is going to be for you, I don't know, since I don't know what your house is going to be valued under the new appraisal, but the tax rate is going down very significantly. And for those, it's not quite showing, for those of you who are not affected directly by property tax values, but are instead in the group of people whose taxes are affected by what their income is, it's going to go down by 6.3%. So the tax rate's following because the evaluation of the houses is more, and grand list is more accurate. And the state is not compensating for the fact that there's a difference there. So what changed significantly from the last budget? So last year, we, in an attempt to reduce costs, didn't buy any computer replacements. This year, we're reinstalling $250,000 to replace aging equipment. We need to have, devices for our students to use, and they get old and they do need replacing. The maintenance position that was reduced last year is still not being replaced. We would have liked to have put about $450,000 in to move several positions which have been very important post-COVID around student mental health and so forth, dealing with a lot of the stress associated with COVID, from money that's been funded by grants from the U.S. government, very much like the funds that the town was just talking about, to put that in this year's budget, but we decided not to. That may be a risk that, given what's going on in Washington, that we'll come to regret, but that's the choice we made at the time. Some paraprofessional positions that were reduced last year are also not being included in this budget, and supply and equipment lines that were not included last year are also not being mapped. So the big difference is we put back in the money for computers, and we decided not to transfer as we had intended to from the grant funded side of things to the tax funded side of things, some money that we were going to do. So this is the actual language that is going to be on the ballot. And as you note, it talks about the $16,000 per student amount and the amount that is higher than it was last year. So that's about a 13.75% increase. So that's what you will see. But as we said, that doesn't necessarily mean that your taxes are going to go up given the way the funding formulas work. So this talks about what we just talked about. If the tax rate is predicted to go down, why didn't we add more money to the budget? Well, we looked at the possibility of vitalizing some of the areas where we had cut money last year and putting some money in to cover those things. But there are a number of factors that affect school funding. One of them is there's a limit on how much you can increase the per pupil spending. And so irrespective of what the adjustment is from the grand list going back to 100%, the other side of that is if we spent too much, we would start getting hit by penalties from the state. So we really didn't have that choice. So we did that. And anything else? Let's see. So that's basically the presentation. And just as was discussed by the town, a lot of expenses are not things that we really control. One of the bigger drivers is, as was the town, is healthcare. We actually used to have a plan that, in my opinion, was very, very good at keeping control on healthcare costs for education employees. But the state took control of negotiating healthcare costs away from us. That's done by the state. We're not allowed to play with that. We live with whatever they negotiate and so forth. And like everybody else, we're hit by inflation.
Okay, are there questions in the room? Or Peter, if there are, come on down to the microphone. Nothing like a decrease in the tax rate to keep people in their seats.
I'm still Colin Butler from Wilder.
Yes, sir.
This is a question for Jacob, I suppose. Can going back to the CLA rising to 100% or perhaps higher, what does that really mean for a Hartford taxpayer? I'm not sure I come close to understanding school financing in Vermont, but my impression is that if the CLA drops into the 60% bracket, which I think is where we were or are until the new appraisals lodged, what does that mean that the state funds us at a lower rate, in effect punishing us for the low CLA?
So basically, there's two marks. One is like if you're too low, and I think it's like 66%, that triggers a reappraisal. And then if you're above the 115%, that triggers a reappraisal. Obviously, this year, the CLA is a little bit more complicated because keep in mind that this is the first year that the state is doing a statewide adjustment. So whatever, the towns, they get that number divided by 72. So this is why, when we reached out to the Department of Taxes, they're like, oh yeah, you can use a figure of 130, % for the CLA. But I mean, generally it's, how fair is the town paying their share to the rest of the state taxes. So obviously, 100%, they're paying their fair share.
So if I may, also, I think I can address your question. They don't adjust what they send us, they adjust what they tax us. So it's an attempt to be fair, but like all attempts, it's a little bit kludgy and clumsy at times. So theoretically, if you're at 100% and you're getting charged a rate which will raise the amount of money that the state needs to raise, there's no adjustment by the state based on the CLA. If the CLA drops, they need to raise the same amount of money, but because your taxes, your property is undervalued, they compensate by increasing the rate that they're going to tax you, and vice versa. So it's a compensation for that. In a perfect world, it wouldn't make any difference what the CLA was, because if we were undervalued by 50%, they'd increase the tax rate by a factor of 2. We'd pay exactly the same amount of money. It would feel bad because our tax rate just went up twice. But in terms of the amount of dollars in the check that we wrote to the state, it wouldn't make any difference. But the fact of the matter is that there isn't, in fact, a one-to-one correlation. And the way it gets affected is that the tax appraisal doesn't hit everybody exactly the same way. So the tax rate is hopefully going to be in our favor. And it has worked out often that as the adjustments are made, we paid significantly less than we would have. But if it was absolutely perfect in its mechanism, it wouldn't make a difference, but it does.
You want to follow up with that?
Yeah. That was 2 fairly long answers to what I thought was a relatively simple question. And
Welcome to Vermont.
And knowing nothing simple
Yeah.
exists in Vermont about school finance. The question really is, because the town's CLA has been so low for quite a period of time, the local taxpayers pay higher property taxes as a result of that.
Yes.
Right. And so I guess I will turn to the town manager and the town chair and ask, why do you let the CLA get so low? Why don't you reappraise sooner than, because the impact on the school district is so much larger than it is on the town.
I'll hold that question maybe for Saturday. 2 quick answers to that. One is that it's expensive, of course, to do the reappraisal. And the second is, in theory, the CLA is getting the town to the level that it should be compared to the rest of the state. So in theory, if you reappraised every single year, your CLA would be 100% every year, but your taxes would go up as your town grand list went up. So I weighed in further than I should. I'm sorry. We'll get to that we can get to that on Saturday.
Yeah.
Colin. Yes. Next question.
I'm still Eric Francis from White River Junction. I'm curious, just same exact question. Of the pie chart, how much of the percentage of the total costs for the school budget are healthcare at this point, and what is the percentage increase over last year?
Yeah, we can give you the answer in just a second.
I don't have the exact numbers in front of me as far as the percentage goes. But I know it's still, our situation's a little bit similar, where we're part of the statewide negotiated agreement. And as far as that goes, that's the best of. So they're either going to take the employer's portion or the employee's portion. Lately, they've been going with the employee's portion for the negotiated agreements.
But you do have and that, if you go back a couple of slides, you can show what we're paying increase based on the healthcare. I believe that was in there.
Potentially, in the event that Eric shows up on Saturday, you could also have the total figure the way
642.
The town manager suggested.
So we don't have the total, but the increase this year was $642,000 in our healthcare bill. That was the increase, not the total cost of it. On the other side, I have to admit, we've got 400 employees, more or less. So
Okay, next question. Please introduce yourself to us.
Hello there. I'm Kim Souza, town of Hartford. And I just wonder if you could clarify something for me. I missed it and I'm not sure I'm the only one that did. And that slide where you talked about the $450,000 from, I think it was called title funds for like COVID relief funds that were provided for mental health services
Right.
for students. Did those positions, are they staying in the budget or did you take them out of per fiscal?
they are in the budget, but right now they're in the part of the budget that is not paid for by taxes.
So that's where you mentioned the risk part.
The risk is because they're paid for by the federal government under a grant we have, the grant may not continue. And as I was saying, given the news that we've all been seeing with the Trump administration talking about getting rid of the Department of Education, that funding may disappear.
And would that mean those positions would be terminated?
We would have to make that decision at that time. Like the town, we have some funds in reserve that we could apply to that, but I expect we're going to have an awful lot of claimants on those funds. About $2 million of our current budget, which isn't paid for directly by our state and local taxes, are coming out of the federal funds for various programs, lunch programs for students below poverty levels and that kind of thing.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
Any additional questions for Peter this evening? Okay, I see none. Thanks very much. We'll
My
wrap
pleasure.
up that part of the evening.
By the way, there's a lady in the audience who sent a letter to the board saying that she was going to do a write-in candidacy for my position, which what nobody was running for. It's better, I think, to have somebody who's a write-in than nobody in that position. So maybe you seek her out and talk to her.
Yeah, we'll, I think that'll come up here in the next section. Yeah, great. All right, let's take a few minutes to stretch here. We're going to set up another table on the stage, and then we'll start again in a couple, 3 minutes. We're going to resume here with the candidates portion of budget and candidates night. We have close to a dozen positions that we'll be voting on Tuesday. So this evening's a chance for candidates to present themselves to the town, have a chance to make a statement, and then be available to participate in the Q&A afterwards. The way that we're going to do this is we're going to start off with the candidates who are running one person for one seat, so an uncontested race. And I will ask any of these candidates who are in the room who wish to speak to come forward. What we'll do is have every candidate will have 4 minutes, up to 4 minutes to make a statement. And then if they wish, they can take a seat here on the stage. Once we have all the candidates up here, then we'll open it up for the Q&A. So I'll start off here. The first candidate on your list is actually myself for town and school moderator. Slightly awkward. I don't have any prepared remarks, and you can decide at the end of this town meeting cycle if you want me to do it again. We have 2 candidates for seats on the West Hartford Library Board. Are either of those candidates here? Karen or Mary? Yes, please. So what I'll ask you to do is come right on up here to the podium. And you can make your speech.
Hi, my name is Karen Powell. I am a West Hartford resident. I've been in West Hartford for 1989. My kids have grown up, graduated high school here, and currently one of my daughter is an employee for the school. My position is for the West Hartford Trustee Library. I am a fill-in right now, is a part-time appointed from the town. But my position I would like to be is a 2-year term, offering my services to the community to help build the library for the community, not just for West Hartford, but for the whole Hartford area, including outside West Hartford, outside of Hartford, and into Sharon and some of the neighboring communities. I would like to see the library grow and be more popular in with the families, with more programs. And that's why I'm on the board. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Karen. Thanks, Karen. You're welcome to participate in the Q&A or not. It's totally up to you. Okay. Smart candidate right there. Okay, so to clarify, Karen is running to finish 2 years of a 5-year term, and she is on the board now. Mary, are you here? Okay, Mary is running unopposed for a 5-year seat on the West Hartford Select Board. West Hartford Library. My apologies. Okay. And then we have an open spot that nobody has filed for, which would be to finish 3 years of a 5-year term on the library board. Okay, I'm going to move over now to school board. We have a candidate for a 2-year seat on the school board, Jeremy Warren. Jeremy, are you here? Good. And I wasn't quite clear enough with Karen. Please come right up to here. Yep.
I'll keep it pretty short. My name is Jeremy Warren. I'm an alumni here from Hartford High School, 1996. We recently moved back from Atlanta in June of 23, and I just want to give back to the community that raised me. This has been a great community for all of us that grew up here and all the people that are new to it. Prepared some very short notes here. I have one high schooler. He's a freshman here. I have an elementary schooler as well. I have family and friends that are administrators and educators. So I see both sides of it. I have a background in human resources, mostly around policy and compliance. And, you know, I don't really have a lot of competition, so I guess it doesn't matter what I say here, but should you write in somebody else, that's fine, but make sure you write it in the 3-year term, and it's going to be somebody else's name that's going to speak in a second, I think. And I'd like to thank Peter for his years of service here as well. There's probably not a lot of reward and recognition there. And all of you that serve on the board as well. Thank you. One of the things that I'd like to preach is community engagement. You know, I've been to a handful of school board meetings since I moved back, and the attendance is okay. The community tends to get involved when they're angry or the budget goes up. And that's not just, you know, folks with students, it's folks that of every age and, you know, aspect of life. I would really like to see more faces there during the school board meetings. This is great. This is a pretty good house here. Come to the school board meetings. I'd like to see you there. I hope you see me there. So really, you know, academic excellence is something that I would promote, taking care of our students, our educators, and our administrators. Transparency. I know a lot of you were a little upset this summer. And if you weren't, you probably weren't paying attention. And I know what these folks dealt with. And there's things that they can and can't share, and you didn't want to hear it, the folks that were there. But there's things that just can't be made public. And I was one of the ones that weren't happy when things went down that way, but there's a lot of things that I think happen that if you were involved, you would understand. And I'm not calling anybody out here, but I'd like to see more people there. You know, and that's the main point is, you know, transparency, increasing engagement in the community, and taking care of our people and our kids, our teachers, administrators who deal with a lot. I'm going to stick around as long as I can. My wife is currently back in Atlanta and then to Chicago, so I am parenting solo. My high schooler's holding down the fort, and he's your average high schooler, so I'm going to be here as long as I can. Thank you. Hope I have your support.
Yes, the ground. Thanks. Thanks. Great. Okay. We have a open spot for a 3-year seat on the school board. Nobody filed for the seat. I do know, however, that there's somebody interested in launching a write-in campaign. And so if she is here, I'd be happy to have her come to the microphone. Yes, great. Come on down. Why don't you speak from the microphone here? And that would be great. And then Kathy will be available after the meeting, I'm sure. There's my timer. Jeremy, you're ahead. So since Kathy is not an official candidate on the ballot, we thought it was best to not have her on the stage here, but nevertheless, it's important for us to know who's available. So we appreciate, Kathy, that you coming, and please take your take 4 minutes here and tell us about your candidacy.
Odd having my back to all of you.
You can spin around.
Okay. Will that work?
Oh, now you're on the back.
Oh. Okay. Hello, I'm Kathy Lemire. I'm going to read because I don't want to be laying in bed tonight saying, oh, I forgot to say this. So I'm Kathy Lemire, and I'm running as a write-in candidate for the three-year term on the Hartford School Board. My husband and I have lived in White River Junction for the past 16 years, where we moved here from California, although we are both New Englanders from New Hampshire. And we currently have 4 children in the school district. We have a student at the White River School, a student at the middle school, and 2 high schoolers. I'm a local business owner, and I have been actively involved with our schools for many years and have served both as president and treasurer of the PTA of our beloved White River School. When no one officially filed for the open seat, I knew someone needed to step up. Our district needs steady leadership and a strong voice, especially as we navigate sweeping shifts coming out of Montpelier, changes that will undoubtedly impact our schools. In addition to that, the flurry of executive orders from Washington on January 20th, followed just days later by Governor Scott's statewide proposal, left me feeling unsettled to say the least, especially with so few details available. As I followed these developments, it became increasingly difficult for me to remain on the sidelines. That's when I began seriously considering running for the school board. With a 3-year term as the only open seat, I took time to carefully consider what this substantial time commitment would mean for my family, my business, and my community. In doing so, I missed the deadline to file officially, but I still recognize how important it is to fill this role. This year will be a pivotal one for our schools. We are facing a proposed major shift in how our state's education system is structured and funded. There is uncertainty at the federal level. The district is hiring a new superintendent, and building remediation and repair projects need to happen as well. At the same time, as taxpayers, we're being asked to contribute more, and for many that feels unsustainable and or unreasonable. I understand these challenges deeply. I too want fiscal responsible decisions and also want rigorous and excellent schools for my children and all of our students in our district. This is not an easy task, but I am committed to listening, learning, and advocating for our students, teachers, and families. I will collaborate with our current board and incoming superintendent to ensure our district remains strong and forward-thinking. I ask for your support as a write-in candidate, and together we can work toward a future that balances responsible decision-making with a commitment to high-quality education. Thank you. Again, I'm Kathy Lemia.
Great, thank you, Kathy. I'm sure she'll be available after the meeting too, if you want to speak with her more. Okay, we're voting for a total of 4 seats on our select board. One of the seats is a 2-year seat currently held by Mary Erdai. Mary, do you wish to speak this evening? Great, come on up. So Mary is running unopposed for the 2-year seat.
Forward for me.
Perfect.
Thank you for coming tonight. My name is Mary Erdai, and I'm running for re-election to the Select Board. I could tick off my priorities, like roads and bridges, affordable housing, tax concerns, fire and police needs, transparency issues, and budgeting. All are important in this town. But tonight, I want you to examine my role as a Select Board member and how I am personally shaped to do this job. In 1986, Robert Fulghum published the book, All I Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. It became famous and started a trend in books that focused on how our experiences shape our values, who we are, and why we act the way we do. My 30-year teaching experiences, 5th graders up to and including college students, have shaped my role as Select Board member. Let me explain. Number 1, I learned early on in teaching that education and knowledge is not as much about what I say or lecture. Rather, it is what I heard and learned from the students and other professionals using critical thinking skills. As a result, I am not always a big talker in the Select Board meetings. I learn much more by being a good listener. The town of Hartford has an excellent professional staff that I respect and an excellent leader in town manager John Haverstock. The presentations and information gathered through both careful pre-reading of our agenda packets, together with carefully selected questions, helped me to make decisions at the time. Recently, a Valley News opinion piece on December 30th, 2024, written by Martin Gutmann, American professor at the Lucerne School of Business in Switzerland, wrote that, quote, according to a 2020 study, those who speak the most are perceived as having the most leadership mettle, regardless of what they actually say, regardless of their competence or incompetence. Number two, another teaching trait that I benefit from as a select board member is the value of being curious. One must be genuinely interested in the workings of the town, from wastewater management to senior services at Bugby and everything in between. Being curious will generate those careful questions that arise at select board meetings and online as well. It's imperative to want to learn as well as to make decisions. Number three, anything worthwhile takes hard work and sometimes thinking out of the box. Rather than drama, I prefer getting a job done efficiently and effectively. Finally, number four, be leery of seemingly simplistic answers, like someone saying that the town budget is like balancing your checkbook, as one candidate in the past has said. Yes, budgets are about expenses versus revenues, but how a town operates is much more complex. When we all share concerns about increasing taxes, everyone talks about cutting taxes, but you want to preserve essential services without sacrificing the quality of our lives in the communities we live in. One member of the board in the past asked a department head during budget season, quote, "Why don't we just level fund the department?" For this particular department, we learned the budget was 92% people. Level funding would have resulted in layoffs and reduced services by the town. Generally taking about 4 months, the budget is one of the primary responsibilities of the select board. Working on a budget is a complex issue, but we don't do this alone. I repeat, much of what we do is guided by the expert minds and hearts of the dedicated staff and the commissions and the boards who work in this town. Their presentations and comments are the results of their time, energy, dedication for the best outcomes for the town, and that is what their job is about. It is about community, not only brick and mortar, but what will hold this community together now and in the future. These points are the guides for the decisions I make. Thank you for listening. If you want to contact me, I am not on Facebook, but you can email me at the town.
Great, thank you, Mary. Okay, we also have a 2-year seat on the select board that has 1 year remaining. And we have 2 candidates who are running for that spot. And so what I have is, I brought my magic hat, which last year I tried to pawn off as a real Vermont hat. The pattern is correct, the material is not. Okay, so I'm looking for the candidates here to finish out the 2nd year of a 2-year seat. We have 2 people running. And the first person we will hear from is Ashley Andreas.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming out tonight and taking the time to learn a little bit more about me and the other candidates. I just got back really late last night from our first big family road trip in our minivan, which was fun. But it was such a sigh of relief to see the first White River Junction sign on 91. Because every time that I come back from traveling, I always think about how happy and lucky I am to live here. I moved to Hartford when I was 18 years old, and I knew that right away this was where I was meant to be. It didn't take long to see that people here care about the local economy, the environment, and each other more than any other place that I had lived. I took the opportunity to run for this 1-year seat because I believe it's all of our civic duty to be involved. A 1-year term will give me a chance to see how public service will fit into my life as a working mom. Over the years, I have experienced our community through many different lenses. I've been a college student at CCV and a service and retail worker at local restaurants and boutiques. I've been a single mother, needing social services like food stamps, housing assistance, daycare assistance, and services offered at the Haven and the Listen Centers. As I graduated college and started working full-time, I experienced what it was like to hit the benefits cliff. And so I went years without health insurance because I could not afford that and my rent. I've been a community organizer supporting local initiatives in youth and voter engagement, climate resilience, migrant justice, anti-racism, and tenants' rights. I'm a professional in affordable housing and new construction as my career has grown. And now I am a wife and a mother of 2 daughters in the school district. I'm also a homeowner now and a landlord of an attached accessory dwelling. Each of these perspectives have led me to various civic engagement over the last decade. These perspectives also allow me to see things, especially obstacles, from many different angles. As a construction estimator, I love diving into the nitty-gritty details and a good spreadsheet to inform a big picture accurately and within a budget. As a specialist in high performance and sustainable construction, I'm eager to learn more about our water, wastewater, and roadway infrastructure. I'm also excited to dive into the budgeting process. I'm interested in ways that we can get creative with funding sources, and more importantly, which I've heard other folks talk about tonight, how we can build a culture of volunteerism and civic engagement to keep folks in our community and to decrease the tax burden. To wrap up, I'd like to mention that I am painfully aware of the national divide that we find ourselves in. I'm also personally aware of how that divide has trickled into Hartford. On the record, I am not a paid activist. I say that because I think that that divide is intentionally and effectively put into place to keep us fighting each other rather than working together to improve our situations. I don't agree with the false narrative that a candidate or a public servant is either socially progressive or fiscally conservative. I believe that you can and should be both. While I might not agree with every single person on every topic, I can guarantee you that I will never tell you what you want to hear to avoid a hard conversation, and that I will never make grandiose promises that I cannot keep. I'm an honest and hardworking person with the best intention at heart, and I would be honored to earn your vote next Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Our second candidate to fill out the final year of the 2-year term is Patrick Danaher. Patrick, are you here? There you are. Come on up.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Patrick Danaher, and I want to thank you all for being here tonight. Hartford has always been my home. I was born and raised here, and after many years away at sea, I returned because this town means the world to me. I am running for the Hartford Select Board because I believe we need leadership that listens, respects the people of this town, and keeps our government focused on what truly matters, serving you. As a sea captain, I learned the importance of responsibility, making tough decisions, and ensuring the well-being of those who depend on you. Steering a ship isn't so different from guiding a town. Both require clear direction, teamwork, and most importantly, trust. Hartford deserves leadership that is practical, steady, and accountable. Many in our community feel we've drifted off course. Budgets continue to grow, yet our roads, services, and local economy aren't improving as they should. Affordability is becoming a significant concern for many residents. While I don't claim to have all the answers, I do know this: we need leadership that listens, spends taxpayers' money wisely, and prioritizes Hartford's best interests. Fiscal responsibility is paramount. Every dollar the town spends comes from your hard-earned paycheck, and that should never be taken lightly. I will work to ensure our budgets are transparent, sensible, and focused on real priorities like infrastructure, public safety, and making Hartford a great place to live and work. Open communication is also essential. Our select board's role is to serve the people of Hartford, not to advance personal or political agendas. This means listening to all voices, fostering an environment where everyone feels heard, and making decisions with transparency and integrity. I may not always get it right, but I promise to always listen, learn, and strive to do what's best for our town. Community is the heart of Hartford. Our town is built by hardworking individuals, families, business owners, teachers, first responders, and so many others who seek a fair opportunity in a town that supports them. My sole aim in running for the select board is to ensure Hartford's future is strong, stable, and affordable. I'm not running because I have all the solutions. I'm running because I deeply care about Hartford and its people, and I believe that together we can achieve more. I would be honored to have your vote on March 4th. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Okay. What we have now is we're going to be electing 2 people for 3-year seats. So we have 3 candidates running for 2 spots. We've got 3 names here in the magic hat. Okay, and our first candidate will be Lanny Collins.
Every time I get up here, I think it's going to be easier, and it never is. You ready?
Yep.
Okay, thank you all for coming to this event. And for those of you that are taking the time to watch this on video after it's published. So to start, I'm not capable of delivering a great speech like Malala Yousafzai or President Ronald Reagan or President Barack Obama. And I'm certainly not a great writer, says determined Melville, who wrote masterpiece Moby Dick, or of poetry like T.S. Eliot. And I rightfully admit that I'm a world apart from the great political philosophy of Dr. Martin Luther King. What I am is genuine. And if you bear with me, we'll both get through this relatively unscathed. If you don't know me, I'm Lanny Collins. I'm a 4th generation Vermonter from Hartford. Why is that not the most important detail to have a candidate here? It's not the most important, but what it does mean is that I have a vested interest in our community. Growing up here in Hartford, graduating high school in '84, I've seen Hartford go through many growing pains. Because of that, I have a better understanding of how accepting, or in some cases unaccepting, some of the changes have been to folks in our community. And I think I'm better able to relate to much of the community because of it. And I'm sure there's many more growing pains to come. So I have undergraduate degrees in electromechanical engineering, my master's in operation project management. I've done 20 years of service in the military between active duty and reserve, retired. I was on fire department here for 20 years, for 15 years as a volunteer, serving our community, and it's means a lot for me to give back. I'm a member of Valley Bible Church here in town, so I have very deep rooted connections. So my work within the select board has been part of the collaborative process to hire the new town manager, work towards development of 4 successful budgets. And it goes without saying that I'm the most engaged person on the select board. I'm not afraid to challenge both staff and presenters that come before the board. If I'm asking the questions, I'm sure you are as well. For a long time, many Hartford residents have seen continual increases to their taxes without a great deal to show for a real return. Yes, we pave and plow the streets, and we provide exceptional ambulance and fire, as well as police services. And maybe that's enough for folks, and we're all happy with that. But for many, the cost is not worth the return. We all understand the old saying, death and taxes are unavoidable, but Hartford can and should do better.
My goals for Hartford would be to establish a more efficient system of interaction through technology, bill payments, video updates on projects taking place. Use the position that we have as public information to get more Hartford's message out there to promote Hartford is a great place to relocate your business and to live in our town. Focus more on transparent government and be accountable to voters and taxpayers for mistakes that we've made in the past, and we've made them, and the ways to correct them. Work towards development of measurable systems in town that enable us to improve them. You can't improve what you can't measure. Develop a plan towards longer-term care of equipment. Maybe that's going to cost us more upfront, but will save us more in the long run. Example of this would be stainless steel dump bodies for trucks. They don't rust out from all our salt. My idea, we need to work towards a long-term solution for transfer station and curbside recycling, better use for town property, maybe set up an impound yard for vehicles or something. Long-range plan for our police department, building needs, better collaboration with schools. So in closing, I can't stand up here and guarantee that any of these items will be accomplished by me alone. As one person alone cannot make change. It requires the work entire select board to accomplish good works for Hartford. I am and will continue to work for Hartford to ensure that we can all maintain our life in a community that stresses a fair return on your tax dollars. Again, thank you all for coming. I ask for a vote for me on March 4th. Lastly, I leave you with this. Lanny Collins. He may not be pretty, but he's pretty damn good for Hartford.
Thank you, Lanny. Okay, our second candidate for the 3-year seat from the hat is Miranda Dupre.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Miranda Dupree, and I'm running for the 3-year term on the select board. I recently heard someone say that people move to Vermont for one of 3 reasons. They're moving back, they're moving for work or school, or they're moving for love. And I moved to Hartford 3 years ago for love. I followed my fiance here so he could attend the Center for Cartoon Studies in White River. And I won't lie, I was pretty nervous moving here. I'm originally from New Orleans and I've only ever lived in cities. So when I found out we were moving to a town with only 10,000 people, I figured there'd be nothing to do and I wouldn't make any friends. Obviously, as I stand before you today, that has not been my experience at all. Within a few months, we started to build a community here and put down roots. Professionally, I work at Vital Communities, a nonprofit based in Hartford, but working in the entire Upper Valley. I am the BIPOC community navigator there. So my role is to find ways to advance home ownership and business ownership for people of color who live in or are moving to the area. Something we found with talking with people who are leaving is that in addition to struggling to through the pathway for ownership, they also are really struggling to build community here. And if our values as a town are being welcoming and inclusive, then why don't people feel that way once they're here? Hartford's identity is tied to a strong sense of community that its residents have worked really hard to build. And in line with that, they're protective over it. But sometimes I believe that protectiveness gets in the way of our real values, creating this harsh distinction between a Vermonter versus a Flatlander, and really just getting in the way and not allowing us to share in the love that we all have for Hartford, whether we've been here for 7 generations or for 6 months. And that's a large part of the reason that I want to serve on the select board. I love Hartford and I want to help foster the community feel that we all love with everyone who finds themselves here. A few aspects of the community that I want to work on are things like affordable housing. I want to support local development that we want to see as a community, in part to support our local builders and as a way to support our business owners who need staff, but also to support the community that's already here and having enough residents to provide the resources and services we need and share in the property taxes so that we're not priced out of our community. I want to work on economic development, supporting local businesses who can add to our community and bring in additional revenue and services. My work with Vital Community really gives me a deep understanding and insider knowledge of both housing and economic development, as day to day I'm collaborating with organizations, lenders, and service providers to better serve our community members. I recently actually hosted an event last year that brought together stakeholders to discuss challenges for ownership for people of color and ideas on resources and solutions. At our next event, we're going to take those ideas and bring them into the real world so that we can decide as a group if they're viable places to spend our time and energy. And I think that's something that I'll bring to the select board as well, really brainstorming and bringing those ideas to reality as a community. I also want to work on transparency and accessibility in local government and democracy. I want residents to be able to understand the going-ons in our local government. I know that when I moved here, it took a while for me to understand things like public transportation, town meetings, listservs, and even what a select board is. And so I've had experience working in complex industry sectors and making language accessible and understandable to community members. And finally, I want to focus on our values of being a welcoming, diverse, inclusive, and equitable community. I want our community to be vibrant. I want people to move here and feel at home. I don't want them to struggle to find their place. I've worked locally on a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative for the Vermont Conservation Districts, and my work right now is rooted in building a diverse and inclusive community. Being a select board member would allow me to combine my passion for community with my skills in leadership, collaboration, community advocacy, conflict resolution, and problem solving, skills that I've been fostering for the last 10 years working with communities. Hartford is unique in the way that local government can accomplish change that has a real effect on the community. And I want to better the community through my actions, and the select board feels like a perfect opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Miranda. Okay, our final candidate this evening, also for the 3-year seat, is Eric Kraus. Eric, come on up.
Hello, good evening. My name is Eric. Let's try that. Good evening. My name is Eric Kraus, and I'm running for the 3-year seat on the select board. I've lived in Hartford for about 15 years and in Vermont for about 34. I'm running because I want to serve this community and help to shape the future of Hartford. I'm cautiously optimistic about that future. But first, a bit about how I got here. I can trace the path of my decision to run for select board back to 1977. The first town meeting I recall attending in Burke, Vermont as a 7-year-old. I'd like to think I was there to learn about civic engagement. In reality, it may have had more to do with keeping me out of trouble at home while both parents were attending the meeting. The reasons aside, the result was positive. That meeting, like others and others like it in the years to follow, left a lasting impression on me about the way we do government in Vermont. Everyone had a voice. Everyone had a vote. Fast forward a decade and I leave Vermont for college, earn an engineering degree, and enjoy a career designing and integrating software systems for clients throughout North America. Maybe you're thinking, how can someone who spent a career doing that type of work contribute on the select board? Here's one example. Every project I can recall started with parsing out the what from the how. This is a discipline that has served me well over the years. We run the risk of short-circuiting the process, of overlooking solutions, if we don't properly frame the problem, and if we skip to the how details before you fully understand the what, the requirements. In 2016, I joined the Hartford Energy Commission, which I served on for about 5 years. I joined because the technical nature of energy efficiency appealed to me. At some point, however, I had an epiphany. The work was not all about the wonky technical stuff. If we hoped to be effective, we needed organizers, storytellers, writers, lawyers, and so on. So when I helped the town create the Climate Advisory Committee, I was excited that in addition to the town's energy coordinator, I'd be working with a writer, an attorney, and someone with expertise in permaculture. I've been actively following town business in Hartford for at least the past decade, so I have a good idea of what I'm getting into and the current state of things in Hartford. What do I hope to achieve on the select board? I expect to contribute to problem solving and decision making for initiatives that are already in the works for the coming year. The future of the transfer station and curbside recycling, to name two. I'd like to help make improvements to the process of producing operating budgets and capital budgets. I see potential in several areas. One, enhancing how we represent and communicate the budget using graphs, charts, statistics, benchmarks, and summaries. Two, putting the target tax rate increase back into the operating budget guidance. And three, producing multi-year financial plans in order to align operating budgets with strategic initiatives and capital projects, to communicate medium and long-term direction, and to anticipate imbalances between projected revenues and projected expenses. I believe more select board time needs to be devoted to defining and communicating the direction of the town and to synchronizing that direction with budgets and financial plans. Back to the future. As I said earlier, I'm cautiously optimistic about the future. I'm cautious because I have some insight into our current predicaments and our current trajectory. Many of the narratives our society relies on today are not serving us well. On the other hand, I'm optimistic because I recognize the wealth of resources that we have in Hartford and beyond. The passion, the creative potential, the hard work of town staff and the private sector, and volunteerism are all cause for optimism. In fact, it was things like Green Up Day that drew me back to Vermont. What an impressive example of how we pulled together, how the practice of picking up trash on a Saturday in May serves as the seed crystal for goodwill, trust, community connections. At the end of the day, that's the bedrock upon which we build. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Okay, we've had a chance to hear from all of our candidates, and now we have a chance to hear from you, asking questions of our candidates. What I hope that we can accomplish here is really get a chance to hear from our candidates as much as possible. So particularly in the early part of the going here, I would appreciate questions that are relatively directed and brief, and I'll try to elicit the same from our candidates. That'll give us a chance to cover a bunch of ground. And then as the evening goes on, if people are still here, we want to dive deeper into some other topics, that'd be great. So when you come up to the microphone, again, tell us your name and where you live. And if you could direct your question to one of the candidates, that'd be great. And then I will give the other candidates for the same seat a chance to sort of respond. So get us started.
I'm Jen Durgan. I live in Wilder. I had a question for Patrick. First, I want to say thank you all for putting your hat in the ring because this work is not easy and it's super tedious. So thank you. I had a question for Patrick. I liked what you said about, focusing on infrastructure and upgrades and that sort of thing. And I wondered, do you support the climate action plan for the town? Do you support the climate action plan for the town, which deals especially with like increasing heating and cooling efficiency, electric, lawn maintenance equipment?
Yes, certainly I do, as long as it's affordable.
Okay.
Ashley, do you want to speak to that at all? Just as a response?
The mic, are these on? Oh yeah, they're on.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely support the climate action plan. I was lucky enough to be part of the focus group that created it for a short time. I didn't get to see the full thing throughout, but I think there's some really, I think some of the things are more achievable than others. Some of the things are more cost effective than others, but I think overall it's really important to be informing our long-term decisions around infrastructure, for sure.
I think the long term is kind of what it may be more expensive now, but it'll save us money, over 5 years or something like that. Okay,
Yeah, and if I could
Thanks, Jen.
could I add one other thing to my answer?
It's okay.
Mary's right next to you here. Let's give a chance to hear from Mary.
I appreciate your question a great deal. Several years ago, when we had the block party, and I was there to try and get information from people about how to spend the ARPA funds. About 5 times as many answers were about, let's go with the climate action plan. So I feel that the people are very much clued in, particularly since we've had some of these flooding events the last 2 summers. And also, as I talked with John Haverstock this last week when we had a select board meeting, I was concerned about, like so many people are, about federal grants, because we had these chargers, fast chargers set up to go into the South Main parking lot. And right now, I guess we're only going to get 4, but we'll see, we hope. Maybe there'll be other funds, but these are things that I think are very important.
Anybody running for the 3-year seat want to speak quickly to the climate action plan? Yeah, Eric.
Thanks for the question, Jen. I think the common narrative is that in order to address climate change, we have to spend money on technologies. And that's part of the equation. But I think we have to remember that climate change is not the problem. Climate change is a symptom of the problem. And once we reframe it that way, we can start to treat both the symptom and the problem. I think the problem has to do basically with the size of our human endeavor is sort of exceeding the biocapacity of planet Earth. And that's sort of a mouthful, but the important thing that I'm trying to make, point that I'm trying to make is that treating both the symptom, if you treat only the symptom, you're missing a big part of the picture. And the other point I would make, because I know we want to keep these short, is that climate action doesn't always have to be about spending money. It could be about the action not taken, which can go hand in hand with affordability. Thank you.
Great. Miranda?
I'll just add that everyone has pretty much said anything I would say, but I'm definitely in support of the climate action plan.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we've already missed a couple of goals on our climate action plan.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the cost of climate change is extraordinarily expensive. And I support actions towards what Eric is saying. Educational point is really important for us. The underlying problem, it's not as simple as saying, yes, it's yes and or yes, but there's so much more to do than just throwing money at a problem until it goes away.
Yeah, and being
that's
smart
where
about
the biggest problem with the climate action plan is that there needs to be a huge educational piece that goes with that.
Great. Thanks, Lanny. If people are thinking of asking a question, it's helpful for me to know that. So whoever's next wants to come out to the microphone. I saw a few folks moving around. Are there questions for our candidates here? Thank you, Kim. Whoever's also thinking of a question, if you want to come in behind Kim, again, that helps me to know how to conduct the meeting. So yeah, take it.
Kim Souza, Town of Hartford. Also have a question for Patrick Danaher that I had planned to ask tonight, and FX Flynn kind of beat me to the punch this morning on the listserv. So if anyone saw FX Flynn's post, that is sort of my question to you is, I think this is your 3rd run for select board. So my guess is that you've learned a little bit about what the job entails, and have heard you cite many times about, lowering taxes, cutting the budget, lean operation, those kind of phrasings. And so I'm curious to see if there's any examples you can cite about specifically items that you might cut from the fiscal 26 budget had you had the opportunity, with the understanding that I think it would take something along the lines of like $1 million to reduce the tax burden on a $250,000 house, which doesn't exist anymore. It would take about $1 million to reduce that by $175. So like reducing the budget by $100,000 might reduce the tax burden on that kind of house by $17. So I'm curious to know if you can cite any examples of specifically how you would balance that budget.
Well, thanks for the question, Kim. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Well, certainly, we all want our taxes to go down. One of the areas we're going to have to take a hard look at is our school budgets and the size of our staff and our town staff. So since we can't cut the insurance and healthcare costs because that's in cement by the state, then we're going to have to really look at positions in order to cut the budget. So that would be one of my suggestions.
May I follow up?
No, I don't have, I'm not going to, that's not going to get me any votes. That's why
it's kind of a hard job.
Right. I know it's a hard job, but we need to make hard decisions. And unfortunately, that's one way we could do it. So
thanks for your.
It's a tough choice, but we have to sacrifice if we want to.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Kim. Yeah.
Did you want to let other candidates?
Ashley, do you want to speak to that? Or that was kind of directed specifically to Patrick, but you're welcome to.
Yeah, I can just say quickly that I did some canvassing and plan to do some more canvassing, knocking on people's doors to let them know I'm running. And, of course, the cost of living here came up, the tax rate came up. But I found that in these conversations, it's like we want to reduce taxes, but also we love all of the services that come with living here. So I think even as residents, it's finding that balance. I think in this 1-year term, I hope to hear more from the different departments and from the residents about where they think we'd be willing to make some cuts. But yeah, I don't have any things that I'm going in thinking we need to get rid of. And I certainly don't think getting rid of staff would make living in the town more enjoyable.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on to my next question here because I have a queue forming, which is great. So yes, please introduce yourself.
Hi, your name is Rocket, resident of White River Junction. Good to see you all. Wow, it's been a minute. I think a lot about our select board, and I know that having sat up there, that it is a commitment to make. I appreciate that. I worry a lot from the few years I've been in town, voices that are not represented in this room and on the select board. During my time on service, we didn't have any parents who actively had kids in the house, and I think that could change with the makeup of the select board. And the nature of the timing of these meetings, the length of the meetings really was prohibitive for people coming in. So I would love to hear just candidates address how you think the select board itself could operate more efficiently, how you specifically think you could contribute towards that. Similarly, I do feel like something that has happened year over year during my period in Hartford, certainly, is the divisive dialogue where issues that I personally don't think are pertinent or relevant to the position of select board do bleed into the conversation and the debate of the select board. Every year, candidates come up and everyone stands in the room. We all give lip service to wanting to be a little bit more kumbaya and a little bit closer together. And the reality is that every year we go through more acrimony and division. And I would love to hear what you all think something is that has been brought up that is not pertinent to the select board, but where you also feel like you could move more towards the middle. Thank you.
Okay, we got a couple questions there. Let's take one of them and we'll go right down the line here.
I would take the second question.
And Mary, why don't we start with you? So the first question was about efficiency of select board and ways that you think it could be more efficient and what you might do towards that end. And let's make it a kind of a lightning round here down the table.
Rocket, thank you for the question.
Sure.
I think one of the things that we actually did was last year, we got together with Dominic Cloud to talk about having a select board that was more effective and efficient. And we realized that there are a lot of things that we and I'm not just talking about the current select board, but this goes back with some movement among the select board members, that people have different desires to present their own agenda. And so we tightened up on how we approach some of those things. And we revamped the select board rules and procedures, which I think has done a tremendous job. Thanks to Mike Hoyt, I think, who keeps us on task, who has kept us on task. I think there's always room for growth. There's always room for change in a best practices way. But I also think, and Rocket, I'm sure you're aware of this, it's really hard to get people on the select board when, this is one of the things that we worked on, when some of our select board meetings were 4 and 5 hours. People work during the day, they want to see their kids, they want to go home. And I don't think after like 3 hours time, people make very good decisions. So I think that we've become more efficient. I also think it's hard because we all kind of end up with, I mean, this is the most diverse as far as age group of people that I've seen in a long time. I myself am retired, Lanny's retired. And it's, you know, it's those people that end up running because other people definitely want to spend their time with their family and they are working on other things. But one of the things I've appreciated is I think that most of the commissions and boards, when people come up, they've only been in the town for maybe 5 years or less, and yet they have this enthusiasm to want to volunteer for commissions and boards. So
But
I
how
have
to
a lot of-
solve that problem, right?
Okay, Rocket, I got it. Thanks.
Rhetorically.
Yeah, and I'm not going to take your second question now, so you can, if you want to get back in the queue, you're welcome. Anybody else want to speak to this question of efficiency, how to make meetings more efficient and what you could do?
Yeah, I'll speak a little bit. Having not, been in the position of a board member for a meeting, I do know that the way the process works is that board members are presented with a packet of information ahead of the meeting that the town manager sends out. And from what I've heard from current board members, it's an excellent, very detailed resource that my personal commitment would be to take the time ahead of the meeting to really read through that information, ask any questions that I have via email ahead of the meeting so that when we get in there, we can really just kind of all have a basic understanding to move things forward rather than kind of, dragging things out. So.
Yes, Lanny.
Yeah, one of the things, Rocket, by the way, it's nice to see you, and I'm glad you're still participating in local government. Once in a while. Good to see you. One of the things that we have a problem that I perceive on the select board is that we have things that come up on our agenda that are informational only, that are supposed to be informational only. And unfortunately, we end up getting in long debates about those things and trying to solve the problem when it's just intended to be an informational only aspect. And when we come to a decision, I mean, that's the time to have the debate over things. But if we're given information from an entity that comes before us, there is so much time, I think, that is spent on just deliberating back and forth among members of the board. And I'll admit I'm guilty of it at times too. We need to curtail it. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak to this?
Could I say something? Well, I'd like to, I've been watching the board meetings for about 5 years now, and I think they've much improved with Mike Hoyt, and I think he runs it like a business meeting, which it should be, because we're doing the business of the town. So congratulations to Mike, but just keep the meetings streamlined, do the business, and get out of there. And also, be prepared, do your homework, be on time, and that's what I intend to do.
Miranda?
I think as everyone else has mentioned, the efficiency of the select board has definitely, from my understanding, improved over the last few years. But also just thinking about the time commitment that the select board requires, I'm kind of hopefully going into this role, thinking that it's part of my responsibility to be a listening ear for the community and take the time to, it might be hours and hours. I've talked to many people who say they spend, 5 to 15 hours a week on select board commitments. And yeah, just like prepared to be that listening ear for community members and allow people to feel heard.
Eric, efficiency and how to accomplish it.
I will try to be efficient. Yeah, I think other candidates have made good points. I mean, being prepared is an obvious one. But there's also some work that should happen behind the scenes in terms of understanding support for a given issue or support for a given vote. And it's not to get around open meeting law, but it's just to be productive. Like, don't raise a motion or bring up an issue if it has no support. That's just performative. The other thing I would say, just to add to this conversation, is that the collaboration with board committees and commissions is probably, there's probably some benefit that can be drawn there. For example, spinning up ad hoc committees to have them work on a task and then report back to the board. The Bugby Senior Center is one example that came up the other night on that. So that's something, an opportunity, I think, whether it's ad hoc or standing committees and commissions, where the board can look at how does it expand its capacity by leveraging some of the other bodies in the town and empowering them.
Great, thanks. Okay, next question. Please reintroduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Kathy Melisick from Wilder. And one quick correction, we do have people, or we have had people on the select board who have children. So that's important, I think, to note. And I have also appreciated, as other people have mentioned, how much more efficient the select board has been and relatively drama-free since last year's election. So I look forward to that continuing. My question is for Patrick. A little background. I can't say I'm a native Vermonter because I was born in New Hampshire. I know. Ooh. But as someone who has lived here for more than 40 years, lived in Hartford for more than 25 years itself, I welcome the energy of people who want to serve and run for office. I don't think that necessarily multiple generations of someone's lucky existence to have been blessed with being born into the state and living in this state necessarily qualifies them for office. I think that the energy and the dedication to this and the history of their participation in meetings and town events, committees, is the important thing that shows me that I want to vote for that person for office. So I guess what I'm wondering is, I know, Patrick, you've mentioned on the listserv that, for more than 40 years, you've been away as a sea captain. So I'm curious what you mean when you say, as you did tonight, that Hartford has always been your home, given that you haven't been here for 40 years. You've got the property in Massachusetts. Could you please explain how Hartford is your home and how many select board meetings you've been to? Thank you.
Well, thanks for the question. I'm glad to be so popular. Well, I was, I guess, why is it my home? Because I was born here. I was born in actually a schoolhouse in my neighborhood, and we moved next door. So, and it was a farming community up there. I was schooled at the Hartford Grammar School, went to the middle school. My dad actually helped build the middle school. He helped build the Wilder Dam. I went to college, was the first one in my family to go to college. So yes, I would say this community is what shaped me and what gave me my morals and values. And now I've come back here. I've inherited our family home. I feel I can give back to the community that shaped me. It's personal, and that's why I'm running for this office. I have the time. I'm retired. So I think I'm qualified to be up here because I know the town, it shaped me. I got to go away and see the world, which also gave me a lot of insight about the world and the town and Vermont. And so I think I'm unique in that way that I was shaped by it, went away, got different ideas, and now I'm back And I think I can contribute a lot to this community and the select board. So that's why I'm sitting up here.
Great. The question was, how many meetings, Patrick, select board meetings have you attended?
Well, I've attended probably most of them online and watching them on YouTube. I must say, and I think I've said this before, sitting through those meetings, I'm not sure is beneficial when you can view them online at a little bigger clip and get the gist about what's going on. So,
Okay. Thanks, Patrick. Actually, the question was really to Patrick, but you just want to speak just briefly about time in town as relates to candidacy.
Yeah, well, I was not born here. I wish I was, because like I said in my speech, this just felt like the first time in my entire life that I felt like I was at home somewhere. I'm from Pennsylvania, like rural, whole country Pennsylvania, not like Philly or somewhere fun. um, and yeah, I just was always kind of like felt out of place. It was a very commercialized, very like a lot of fracking, no care for the environment, not much regard for the factory workers, which I come from. My grandparents and my parents working in factories. So yeah, it just felt like home to me immediately. And the people here have been so welcoming. And I don't know a number of meetings that I've attended, but over the years, I'll be totally transparent. As a mom, it hasn't been easy to be as engaged as I'd like to be, but knowing that I can kind of drop in and out when things seem important or people need support or there's like a big topic coming up. I've always known exactly where to get those resources, how to join a meeting, how to come in person to a meeting, which I think is fun. So yeah, I like the meetings and I'm excited to hopefully be on this side of it.
Great. Thanks, Ashley. It's always risky for the moderator to risk a joke, but Kathy, the issue you raised of being from Vermont but born in New Hampshire, it's a problem up and down the Connecticut River, and there's a wonderful old adage which dates back to, you can picture the cold farmhouse kitchen, and after the cooking's been done for the day, the oven is still a little bit warm. And so it wasn't uncommon to come down in the morning and discover that the cat had had kittens inside the oven. And so the expression is, just because the kittens were born in the oven doesn't make them muffins. So thanks for setting that up for me. All right, Rocket, I want to skip. Can I skip again to, we'll come back to you if time allows, but yes, let's take our next question.
Hello, my name is Allie Tiffington. I live in White River Junction. Thank you all. This sort of came up a little bit around the idea of maintaining town staff or exploring that as a place for reductions. So my question is specifically for you, Lanny. You made a comment recently on our community Facebook group, Hartford BT Town Info Meeting, and you wrote, I feel that we need to have a hard look at the number of employees in town hall and the contribution that they have to the town of Hartford. Planning and development is not doing what they should to increase our tax base and would be the first place I would look for reductions. So can you please clarify those comments, and are you suggesting that we should cut town staff positions?
I'm not suggesting anything until we examine the contributions of our staff and the value that they bring to our town. As I stated, we have to be able to measure things first before we can decide what we're going to change. And I have a graduate certificate in Six Sigma, and that's one of the things that you have to be able to do. You have to measure things in order to see how you can correct them. And if we can see if there's ways we can improve processes, that'd be a great way to start. If it comes down to the fact that we can improve processes so we can eliminate some staff positions, that's great. I mean, there's processes that we can improve within town hall, I'm sure. And as far as planning and development, we seem to be spending a lot of time dealing with planning and development in the town of Hartford, but yet our grand list has been pretty stagnant for a long time. And I'd like to see more come out of planning and development as far as for pitching our town for development of industry, which is the greatest way to grow your grand list. So I'd just like to see more come out of planning and development. Hopefully that answers your question. I'm sure it doesn't. So
I don't know if I can ask a follow-up.
Let me ask the other two and we can come back to you.
Okay.
Thanks, Ally. Yeah, Miranda or Eric, you want to speak to sort of this general question of budget efficiency?
Yeah, definitely. When I'm thinking about our town staff, I'm thinking about the people that they are and not them as the dollar signs on the budget. I think they bring a lot of value to our town, and I would hate to become like the federal government and send out an email asking them to send us the 5 things they accomplished in the last week. So I'm definitely would like to see budget cuts in other areas rather than in staffing, because I know that we all love the services that we have in this town.
Eric, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier perhaps to go forward with restraint if we find ourselves constrained than it is to cut things that we already have. So I guess I would be looking to the future and just being cautious about what our expenditures are. And that's kind of what I was getting at when I was talking about multi-year financial planning. Looking at, so if the town went ahead with something like that during tonight's budget presentation, you would be making a decision about the upcoming fiscal year's expenses or your tax rate in the context of years 2 and 3. So the next 2 fiscal years, perhaps. And this is an idea that is used elsewhere. Other municipalities do multi-year planning, multi-year budgeting, and multi-year planning. So it's not necessarily going to cut things, but how do we look out longer term and do things better? Coordinating the operations side with the capital side, I think is part of the picture. And I mentioned earlier, I would advocate for putting a tax rate increase back into the budget guidance. I think there are some cases for not doing that. But if you look at what happened this year, so on December 3rd, the staff came forward with a budget that I think was 22 to 24% a tax rate increase. Those things that got removed, those didn't get lost. Those are on the desks of department heads. But what I would like to see is those sort of captured in something that we collectively can see and understand where we're going. So it doesn't get to, my answer isn't really about how do we cut things, but it's how do we do things perhaps with a more vision and communicating them better.
Great.
I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Okay, Rocco, we'll give another crack at it.
I'll try to be more succinct. Just in the divisive era we live in, I feel like it's easy to be distracted by things further afield. I would love to see you as in the position of leadership, a select board here in our community, to really committing to focus on issues that directly affect the matters of our community. One of the things for me, we have a lot of people who are not represented in this room. You see them listed in the police reports. You see them walking on the street. And I would love to see a commitment or hear a commitment from the board to be focused on these things where we had issues. We had a flagpole policy and we had banners downtown. And both of those have spun out to be arguments that I find distracting. And I would love to hear your commitment that we can really narrow in and focus on the center, which is serving the people of Hartford in a really pragmatic way. So I don't know if you have, it doesn't need to be yes, no, but if you have comments on that, sure, I'm open to hearing that as well.
What's this for?
Anybody want to dive in on that? It's an open question. Yes, Ashley.
Yeah, a commitment that I can make, and I wrote about this in the voter guide on the last question, is that I'm in community with many of those people. Like, I know folks who are at the Haven hanging out, looking to get a service, people who are living in subsidized housing, people who are actually struggling day to day to survive in our community. And I think that if our leadership does not have a personal relationship with anybody who's marginalized in some way, then we're missing the mark and we're not, and we're just out of touch. And I think that that's one of the things that's been really frustrating to me about national politics and sometimes even state politics is that like politicians are so out of touch with what regular people are experiencing on a daily basis. So yeah, my commitment is that I will continue to be in community with people who are just trying to get by in this town and also bring a lot of like amazing value and greatness to our town too.
Any other candidates want to speak to this kind of question that Rocket brings up, sort of the local and the national and how they interrelate? Yeah,
I
Miranda.
think something that I know has been happening around town a lot are conversations with community members who share a certain identity. So, for example, some BIPOC groups have been getting together and talking about what this current administration, how it affects their lives, how it affects our community, and fears and hopes that they have. And I think that's my commitment is to be a part of those conversations, make sure that I'm tuning into, conversations with groups of people who don't look like me or don't have the same identities as me and ensuring that like I'm hearing them as community members too and valuing their input, especially in times where it can be hard to be um, public with some of those like opinions and fears. And so, yes, I want to like build relationships with these people so that I can be in these conversations with them and represent them as a select board member.
Anybody else wish to speak to that? Okay, next question. Let us know who you are.
Hi, I'm James Donahue. I live in White River Junction, and I just wanted to give Jeremy some attention. He's been sitting up there.
Wake up, Jeremy.
So
Headed your way.
Jeremy, I'm just wondering if you've become familiar with the governor's education plan and if there are aspects of it that you support outright or other aspects that you have concerns about that you could share with the voters. Thanks.
So I think we're all missing the how. We've heard the what, but we don't know the how. I don't really think that you can support that many communities in Vermont with 5 school districts. I think it'll be fairly biased, and I think it's a conflict of interest for those that might be in power. Vermont is, yeah.
Okay, folks, if we could keep our attention focused up here on the stage. Okay, great. Let's hold on. Rocket, be really great, Rocket, if we could keep the meeting here. Rocket, we'd love to keep the meeting here. Thanks very much. Okay, Jeremy.
Yeah, no, I mean, back at it where I just don't think that you can help the school districts in the state of Vermont by limiting it to 5 districts. I think that puts a lot of power in the hands of very few people, and I think it's a conflict of interest for those that would be in power. Each community should have control over its own unique area, and I don't think Scott's proposal is going to do that.
Great, thanks. Peter.
Peter Merrill, Queechee, Vermont. So 2 weeks ago, maybe, there was a story in the Wall Street Journal about people having moved to Vermont because of COVID leaving now. And one of the main points of this was the extraordinary difficulty there is around housing, which means that we often end up having people move here with energy and innovation and enterprise, and then they leave because they can't hire staff, they can't find a place to live themselves. This is a problem that is not unique to Vermont, but Vermont's version of it is perhaps a little different in that what draws us to in Vermont is in part the fact that it's largely open. And if we have a lot of people come here, maybe why they moved here is no longer really what makes us great in some ways. But nonetheless, growth is one of the real issues that we need to address as a state. So I just was wondering for your thoughts on what we might do to develop a Vermont-centric idea of growth.
Yes, Lanny, take a start at that.
Thanks a lot, Peter. So it is troubling, as you say, housing is ridiculously overpriced. And one of the problems that we're going to face now is that due to this reevaluation, just recently we had our assessor come before the board. And one of the things that really struck me is the staggering price of what the reevaluation on just a mobile home alone. There's some mobile homes in the town of Hartford are going to be increased by valuation by 200%. That's on a mobile home. And that's, it's ridiculous. The houses that they showed us, 50, 60, 70% increase in the valuation on houses. And that in turn is going to set the resale value of those houses that much higher. Housing is a commodity driven business, and we're being priced out of literally house and home. How we get back to what we should be is, I think a lot of it comes down to the state level. Open up what we have availability for lands that we can build on. Act 250, it's been a killer in some places for housing. A lot of those things are not controllable at a town level. A lot of them are state level problems that need to be solved in Montpelier. As far as the state goes, if we want to build housing in the town of Hartford, multi-use or multi-dwelling units are the way to go in the town of Hartford. Twin Pines has been an excellent for our town of Hartford, but Twin Pines only offers like less than 3% of their units for actual low-income housing, and the rest of them are all at mid-priced housing or market value housing, and that's the difficult thing. To get that housing in here that's for the lower income. It's a never-ending problem, and I believe the problem is much larger than what can be solved at a local level.
Thanks, Lanny. Anyone else want to speak to, Peter's question about sort of a Vermont-centric approach to housing and growth? Yes, Mary.
Yeah, I think Lanny has said a lot of it. I was really happy when planning and development told us about the 42 apartments that are affordable in the TIF district. And as some of you may know, on Sykes Avenue, there's going to be multi-level housing, of which about 190 will be market rate and about 48 affordable. And I looked over at the amount when Mr. Winter came to talk to us from Twin Pines, and I went, wow, on my pension and Social Security, I would be at the pretty lower end of that if I didn't have my home. So, I don't know if we have land available to build. I think that was something that was actually discussed one night too at the select board. But so, we do want to help our people, but boy, we're between a rock and a hard place on building homes. I told one of my select board members about something I read in VT Digger about a group called Community Land Trust up in the Northeast Kingdom. And they're actually taking homes and land, they're buying it up and then turning it into affordable houses, low-income houses in perpetuity that would be run by that Community Land Trust. I don't know if that's an answer, but it's something, we have to keep looking into things. And as I said before, we have to think out of the box. I do know one group of young people from New York who came up here to move. They did not move back. They were very pleased with living in Vermont and bought a home in Queechee. So
thanks, Mary.
Yay for them.
Other candidates wish to speak to this question of the Vermont-centric approach to housing and growth? Miranda.
Yeah, this is definitely a hard one. It is at least 60% of my job, and I'm constantly thinking about housing and ways to make it more accessible for people, especially home ownership. I think something that I think about a lot is one, we need more housing, we need more types of housing so that people can move around, so we can decrease demand for housing. Um, Things that I think that we could do could be potentially, like a local incentivized impact fee so that we can ensure that there are affordable housing units available. Um, I think educating the community on like government and nonprofit programs that assist and aid in accessing home ownership, and also supporting nonprofits and programs that are developing workforce housing programs. I'm thinking about this constantly and I have many ideas, and it is a very complex topic, but it is definitely something that is near and dear to my heart.
Anybody else wish? Yes, Eric. Thank you. I'm not sure, Peter, if I would classify it as a Vermont-centric approach, but I did appreciate the content in the draft housing plan for the, no, I've got the name wrong, draft chapter for the town plan for housing. It's a pretty succinct document, and it's got a pretty decent actionable plan in it, strategies and actions. And it starts right off the top with the most basic one, which is sharing homes. And that feels to me like a pretty Vermont-centric approach. And I saw a listserv post in Norwich a while ago for an older person, presumably, who had probably a large farmhouse with extra space and needed someone to come live with them. So it doesn't necessarily address the people that have moved here from the in certain scenarios, but it may address some scenarios, and it's a quick way to generate housing. You don't actually have to build anything necessarily. At any rate, that draft chapter is available on the town website, and I think it's a good resource. And being on this in this seat, I don't think that I'm going to be an expert in housing. But we do have experts. We have a planning development department. We have a housing and homelessness committee. And we can draw on other resources in town to help us move forward.
Great, thanks. Okay. Okay, yeah, Ashley, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, comment on rental prices in the Upper Valley. I feel like there has to be something that we can do at a town level to get that in check. I feel like the positioning with Dartmouth right across the river and traveling nurses, it's so frustrating when young people who work here and are, putting down roots here are competing against travel nursing agencies who can pay out a ridiculous amount for a monthly rent. I'm not saying that I, right out of the gate, say let's ban short-term rentals. That's not what I'm saying. But I think there needs to be more thought to it. Maybe the idea of a rental registry, as someone who has an accessory dwelling on my property that I rent out, I wouldn't mind letting the town know that I have that rental, how much I'm renting it out for. And if there was some sort of incentive to do a long-term rental or connect those landlords with local folks. I just think that there's a way right there to get more rentals going to people who want to live and work here rather than folks who are coming in for the hospital or the college and really don't intend to stay.
Great, thanks. Okay, next question.
Thank you. My name is Beth Long and I'm from Queechee, but I'm just here to correct the record. I'm the CFO and Deputy Director of Twin Pines Housing, and I'd like to say that our housing is affordable in perpetuity, that the vast majority, well, all of our housing is income restricted under 100% of AMI. The vast majority is income restricted under 60% of AMI. Our home ownership program does go up to 120% of AMI, but we do not rent market rate housing. Thank you.
Beth, just to clarify, AMI, is that average monthly income?
Good question. Average median income for the
Average
county.
Got it. Thanks. Okay, thanks. Yes, next question.
That might be the last question. And I have to very specifically say that I'm taking my jam hat off and I'm asking as a citizen. It's very important. But I kind of just wanted to bring something up that hasn't been talked about, but it's something that I think about every.
Just let us know your name and where you
Oh, my name is Jordan. I use they, them pronouns. I don't live in Hartford, but I work in Hartford and I know so many members of our community and I work with a lot of students and youth who live in Hartford. And so this is a question both for the select board and for the candidate running for the school board. I'm trans, my wife is trans, and every day I fear for my life. I've already had to move once in this community because my upstairs neighbor would not stop hate criming us. I live in fear every day. And as the federal government is actively trying to erase us and you know, is passing down all kinds of policies that are off. I just want to know like what you are going to do to protect the trans people in our community and the trans youth in our schools. They are already like the way that sports teams like it's horrible. And I know surprisingly there are a lot of trans people in this community. There are a lot of trans kids in our schools that are scared. I work with them through my job all the time, and we're just really worried. And I want to know what you, as elected officials of our local government, are going to do to protect us when the federal government is not.
Okay, thank you, Jordan. Yeah. Who'd like to speak to this question? Yes, Jeremy, we'll start with you.
I will do everything in my power to protect you and the trans community, as well as all of the communities, especially our children. I think that they deserve to be who they are, and I'm happy you're in Vermont. I feel like you're probably safer here than anywhere else right now. There's family members in your community that are very dear to me, and my son in high school has friends that are trans. So, I mean, I think that they and all people deserve to be able to be who they are and to be loved and protected. So, yeah, anything I can.
Thanks, Jeremy. Other candidates wish to speak to this? Yes, Miranda.
First, I just want to say thank you for sharing that. That's very vulnerable and I appreciate you. I think something that I think is really important when we're thinking about people who don't have shared identities with us and how we show up for them is one, speaking up when we have the opportunity to do so. If you see something, you say something, especially when you have that social authority in a situation. I also think, I know that there are some funds through the select board from the Vermont Community Foundation to do education for select board members and potentially community conversations. And that's definitely something that I want to do, is have community conversations and education around just acceptance, belonging, inclusion, all of these things that we believe are values of our town, but sometimes aren't upheld that way when it comes down to people's actions.
Yes, looks like Ashley, you want to speak?
Yeah. Also, Jordan, thank you so much for being brave enough to ask that question. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that the government cares how you identify and how you live your life. It's none of the government's business other than to support you and provide you with the resources like they do any other group of people. So I just say that I think it's not the government's job to police a group of people based on their sexual identity. But it is the government's job to protect all of the people in that reside in their district. So in this case, the town. And I would do everything in my power to support trans folks and any other group that's feeling like there are any laws or any hate crimes or any kind of happenings that the town can control that are threatening your safety, because that's absolutely unacceptable, just like it would be for the elderly community or for people of color. Like, there should never be groups of people in a community feeling targeted or erased. So absolutely, there should be no question whether we protect trans folks.
I'm seeing nobody at the microphone, so I'm taking that as an indication that questions have been asked. If you do have a question and want to come down, now is a chance.
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment regarding your comments. Thank you very much. I'm Nancy Russell. I serve on the school board and have been for a number of years. I've also a community member. I moved here in 1997. I have grandchildren that have gone through our school system here. And I want, if this community does not realize this, I want you to know that we do have policies and we do have procedures already in place, and we will not be changing those to protect anyone that wants to identify as trans or queer or lesbian or any of the others that they want to do. I have family members who are trans. They are dear to my heart, obviously. And every child, every adult absolutely deserves to have our protection and to make sure that they're going to be protected. But I want you to know that we as a school board already do have policies and procedures in place for this, and we are not going to change those. Okay, we're not.
Oh, Chuck.
Yes, Mary, you want to speak
Just
to
a
the-
quick one.
Yeah.
And then you can go ahead, Kim. H. Corey, commission that's on the town. It's one of the commissions on the town. In line with what Nancy Russell said, we are already working on a policy for gender inclusivity for the town and disabilities and everything to be an inclusive town. So hopefully that will come up soon. But we feel we want to protect you.
Yes, yeah.
Just wondering if other candidates would be willing to respond to Jordan's question as well.
Any candidate who didn't respond who wishes to?
Well, I'll respond. Certainly, everyone and every citizen should feel safe, and we support that, whoever you are. We're all citizens. We're all here together, and you're supported, and you get to do whatever you want as long as you're an adult. So certainly, that's kind of a no-brainer.
All right. Anybody else? Eric, want to speak to that?
Sure. I didn't respond because I couldn't think of more to add than what Ashley and Miranda said. So, part of my identity means that I need to be listening more too. So I would look forward to learning from them.
Great. Yep, Lanny?
Guess I'm the only one that hasn't answered yet. So I guess the biggest thing that I would like to understand is how it is you feel you're not protected in the town and how we can address those concerns. If people feel they're scared of the town and they're feeling like they're unprotected, tell us how you feel you're unprotected and let's solve the problem. That'd be my statement on that. Thanks.
Okay. I'm seeing an absence of a line at the microphone. So I'll take that as a sign that we've come to the end of our meeting this evening. Round of applause for all of our candidates. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight, and we will resume at 10 o'clock on Saturday in the gymnasium.
Yeah.